Welcome back to HANA Basics for Developers. So we've learned quite a bit already about database level development and service level development. I think we're pretty accomplished there. We can build our data models. We can build a lot of business logic within the database, either in the form of SQL script or putting it in calculation views or database level views. We've seen how to write imperative logic as RESTful services, as well as exposer data as OData services. All that's really left, if we were building a complete application from scratch, would be to put a user interface on top of it. Now, I want to say up front, of course, there's all different kinds of user interface technology that could be used along with HANA. We've seen how we have JDBC and ODBC connectivity, .NET connectivity. HANA is a very open platform. So of course we could use any number of other UI technologies, third-party, open source UI technologies. A lot of customers, of course, use reporting tools directly against HANA, either from SAP or third-party reporting tools. But what we're going to look at is the use case of building web-based user interfaces. And there we have really one primary technology which SAP provides, and that is SAP UI5. And of course, we also have the Fiori. Fiori is not so much a technology in and of itself, but a design pattern, a way of utilizing the SAP UI5 technology. So we'll also look at that. We're going to start a little lower level and see how to use SAP UI5 standalone, and then also apply some of the Fiori concepts in later videos. Now, I'll also say the purpose of these next couple of videos is not to teach you everything about SAP UI5. There are other learning materials out there that cover SAP UI5. There are other people that are far more experts in SAP UI5 than me personally, certainly. But what I want to do is really focus on the use cases that are common in the HANA development scenarios, and the little pieces of technology and the way we use SAP UI5 and Fiori that particularly fit within the HANA native development and XSA environment. So, take those pieces, those specific pieces, and then certainly combine them together with some of the other learning materials that are more general about SAP UI5 and Fiori, and you'll have a really good foundation. If you remember all the way back, in one of the very first videos, of course, we created the web module, and when we did that, we got our index.html, and it just put a little button on the screen, and we could press that button, and then the button would disappear. So there's a little bit of client-side JavaScript in there. If you want to see this, so everybody remembers. Test it real quick. Yeah, just this hello world, and I click on it and it goes away. Now we have imported a couple of other test frameworks here. We're kind of going to put those to the side. From this point forward, we're going to code our own user interfaces. But let's start talking about where we load SAP UI5 from itself. Okay, in this initial template created, wizard created web page, it is loading the SAP UI5, what we call the Bootstrap, basically where to go find the main SAP UI5 libraries, the JavaScript and the CSS and the images that make up SAP UI5. You can see here it's loading it from a full URL that is actually publicly available, SAP UI5 HANAOnDemand.com. So this is out on the internet. I could take this URL and I could go here directly in my web browser, and I could load this up, and it's going to load the SAP UI5 demo kit. Now, the thing about doing this, one, that's nice, because that means I didn't have to have installed anything on my local HANA system to have SAP UI5. I could always point out here and always get, very latest versions. New patch levels are put out here on the public site. But then the downside is that maybe it changes without me wanting it to. There's a patch out in the public hosted version. And maybe it changes the way my application works without me knowing about it. Maybe my application sits behind a firewall inside a corporate environment, and I can't easily go out to the internet to get these libraries. So for all those reasons, sometimes it's better to use a local version of SAP UI5, and this is where we deliver SAP UI5 as its own service broker as part of the XSA environment. And this gives you the ability to go against this local version. And unlike XS Classic, we had SAP UI5 and XS Classic, but we were limited to just one version at a time. And the only way to update that version was to do a HANA patch. Well, now we deliver SAP UI5 in a version independent way, so you can actually have multiple versions installed centrally on your system at the same time, and simply through your project configuration, you can choose which version you want to point to. Plus, it can be patched independently of anything else. Really, you don't even need an XSA patch. We put individual SAP UI5 patches out on the service marketplace, which you can load into your XSA environment. So it gives you much more freedom and control compared to the XS Classic environment. So what we want to do now is we want to see how to use this central XSA, this central SAP UI5 version that's in XSA as a service broker, and get rid of this hard-coded public URL where we're loading SAP UI5. So one of the first things we're going to have to do is we want to create a service broker instance for our application of SAP UI5, and we'll go to the XS Advanced Cockpit to do that. This is very similar to the steps that we took to create both our HANA container, our HDI container instance, and our UAA instance. So I'll go ahead into my development space, and I'll go to the service marketplace. Here we see our XS UAA, we see our HANA service, but you notice there's some other ones here that we haven't used yet, mainly the SAP UI5 one. That's the one that we want now. So we'll go ahead and click on that service, and we can see existing instances. I already have one created out here from another application I have on my system. But let's go ahead and create a new instance for this application. And this is where you can choose between different service plans. I only have this one version installed on my system, the 1.52 version of SAP UI5. But there are other versions that are available out there. I think we have 1.38, 1.4 something available for XSA. Pretty soon here we'll have the 1.6 version available, and you can install them on your system, and then what you would see in this drop-down list box is you would see a choice of the different versions. In my system, it's a small local development system. I chose to only install the latest that was available at the time that I was doing this. That's fine, so I go ahead and choose that version. And there are no JSON parameters to fill in. This is pretty easy to use. And then I want to call this Open SAP HANA _00, just like my UAA, except I don't want it to end in UAA. Let's call this one UI5, okay, for the different service broker type. All right, that has created the service broker instance. We have our version configured here, and you can see once we bind to this, really we could change the version simply by changing the plan that our service instance is attached to. So let's go back to our MTA YAML, and now we'll need to declare that as a resource in our application. So I'll come here to the Resources tab. And this is a resource of type, get this zoomed in here. So we want to say that this is a managed service resource. And then we'll say service, SAP UI5 SB, service broker, that's what it stands for. And then we'll say our service plan will be SAP UI5 -1.52. Okay. There we have our resource. And actually, I can come over here to my modules, and I can go to the web module, and I want to add that as a require statement. And we'll come down here, and we'll add a new requirement for, I forgot. You got to switch to the code editor and then switch back to refresh the drop-down list boxes. I didn't follow my own instructions very well there. Now I should find, what did I do wrong? I did not give it a name. That's why I'm not seeing it. That's a little weird. So let's come back over to the resources, and sure enough, I did not type in a name. That's why that didn't show up very well there. So we'll say open SAP HANA 00-UI5. So we'll save that. We'll refresh. We'll come back. And there we are. Now that looks good. And because I made a series of mistakes there, let's go into the code version and make sure this looks good. Yes, I have managed service, SAP UI5. There we are. And then it is a dependency of the web module. And there's no other configuration that I need to add here. That all looks good. Now, before we restart the web module to pick up this change, what I want to show you here is we also need to extend the XS app JSON because we have to, well, that's a little odd. Not quite sure why that happened, but it loaded fine the second time. Maybe I timed out on the back end there. So let me go get my code snippet that I want to put in here. This is exercise 4.3. And what we want to do is we want to add a route handler at the very end. So we have our route handlers that go to our various OData and RESTful services, or XSJS, or XSO data, or Node.js. But what we want now is we want to add another route handler here for our static web content, our HTML5 pages. And up to this point, we haven't needed one because if it doesn't find a route that matches, it's going to fall back to just using the built-in static handler with the default configuration. And we still want that. We still want, if anything else, so basically / asterisk wildcarded. So if none of the other routes have caught, then this is the fallback. This will catch everything else. Send all the requests to the resources folder. So statically access that. It does allow us to now add authentication, UAA authentication to this route. But more importantly, we're going to add a replacement. And we're going to say here in this replacement that that if you find the service, that in any files that are index.html or OData test HTML, then make a replacement available with this variable coming from the SAP UI5 service broker. So what basically we do here, the service broker itself publishes its URL, the full URL path to get to the UI5 Bootstrap, and that way we don't have to hard code it in any of our web pages. It'll be replaced dynamically by the app router, and it'll take the value passed in from the bound SAP UI5 service. So that's what we want to do. We don't want to be hard coding anything. And now the last part that we want to do here is we want to adjust our index.html. We want to take out this hard-coded part, and we want to replace it basically with a new Bootstrap. So let's just grab this, and let's replace the Bootstrap. And we see now, instead of hard-coding the host and first part of the path, we'll use SAPUI5_SB.URL. So to take the value that is being passed in from the service broker, the 3 curly brackets around it let the app router know that this is a variable that we want to have replaced. And you notice we also changed the theme to the newer SAP Belize Plus theme that's supported by the newer version of SAP UI5 that we're utilizing. All right, I think we're good now. We'll save everything. Yep, all saved. Let's restart the web module to pick up the changes that we made to the MTA YAML and XSAP JSON. And here we are. It's relaunched our web page. It looks the same, but if we were to come in here and we were able to do a, I want to do a view source, there, view page source, it did not change. It still has our old value. Okay, so it did not change. And sometimes I have noticed this with the web module in particular. When you change the XSAP JSON, sometimes it does not pick up the changes when the configuration itself. So to make sure that we get the change, let's go ahead and stop the application and then do a clean restart on it. There we are. I can tell already this looks better. The colors are slightly different, but let's verify this. If we do a view page source, then what we see now, instead of the public SAP UI5 Bootstrap location, we see that it's pointing to my local server. And once again, this URL is built dynamically by the service binding and passed in and replaced in the web page by the application router. That way we're not coding anything in the individual index.html files or the manifest or anything like that. It can all be configured in one place in the MTA YAML. If we want to change over to a different version of SAP UI5, it's easy to do so. Now, one thing I want to point out here, I kind of gave you an extra step, and this is because maybe you're on an older release, and I wanted to show you something that would work in both. Because in fact, if we come here and we look at the Resource Manager tab, what you'll see is that the SAP UI5 resource is it was created for us. So the resource name OpenSAP HANA _00-UI5 actually created a service instance here for us. This is a newer feature of the Web IDE. Came with the recent October 2018 update. Both this resource panel, where we can see the resource instances and delete them if we want to, but also the fact that it created one on the fly for us when we ran the application. So actually that first step in this video, when I came over here and I had you come and create a new instance of the SAP UI5 service broker, that was not necessary if you're on the latest version of the Web IDE. Now, if you were on a slightly older version, if you were still on SPSO3 but not the latest patch level, then you would have needed this. You would have had to pre-create the service broker, and it would have connected to it and would have used that one. But if you're on the latest version, then the run operation will create it for you. It will provision the service. So we actually wouldn't have needed this step to come over to the admin console and pre-create that. And you actually see here, I mean, all along the Web IDE has been able to create HDI container resources for us. We've never really had to manually create those. But now you see it also being able to create SAP UI5 resources, basically the several of the basic ones. There's other resource types like the UAA that we still have to manually pre-create. The Web IDE cannot create all resource types. But you know, this is something we hope to improve over time. We've already added a few more of them, like the UI5 one, that it can. create at runtime for you, and I would like to think it eventually will get them so that we'll get it so that all of them can be created for you by the Web IDE when you run or build, and we won't have any of the manual creation. But I wanted to point that out. Also, I don't think we've had a chance. I don't think I've shown you even this resource panel in general. This is really great, for cleaning up when you're done with development, which we are not done yet. But once you're done with development, maybe before you delete your project, you can delete the associated resources that go along with it, not leave a bunch of orphan HDI containers and stuff like that out there. You can just come here and manually delete those service resource instances as well. So with that, I know that's really basic. We'll do some more complex examples in subsequent videos. This introduces you to the SAP UI5 as a service broker in the XSA environment, shows you how we can wire it into our application, and so that we're not reliant on any external SAP UI5 libraries.